In the previous video, we looked at interquartile range, and what we want to do now is take a little bit of a deeper dive into standard deviation and variance, and how our calculators, which in this course we're using the TI-Nspire, can really help simplify our calculations. All right, so let's go ahead. So I highly encourage you to stop this, maybe take a screenshot or go ahead and write these down in your notes, because this is some really good general information about what the standard deviation is. So instead of sitting here and just kind of reading this out verbatim, I may reference a couple properties that are listed in here, but please keep this for your records. So let's take a look at an example problem and see how we can go ahead and use our calculators to help solve these problems. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So for the data sets in example 3, which we have gone over before, we want to find the variance to 2 decimal places, the range, and the interquartile range. And again, for reference, we've already covered the variance in some of the infographics above. So go ahead and take a look at that. But just remember that it is the standard deviation, which is denoted as lowercase sigma x. And what we do is square that. So that's going to be important to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and figure out what to do. So let's go ahead and start with this first one. The number of ice cream sold over a period of 13 weeks. 146 all the way through 238, not in order. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my calculator. And so once you add a list and a spreadsheet and you have score in your A column and you have all the scores, again, you want to select B1 without the cursor blinking, hit menu, statistics, stat calculations, one variable statistics, click OK. My X list is going to be my score. I have no frequency list, so let's go ahead and hit OK. So I find that my X bar, which is my mean, my mathematical middle, is 171.308, and I have all of that information going down here. Now, what's cool about the calculator is that once you run one variable statistics, all of these variables are actually stored as variables in your calculator. So why is that significant? Because if you go ahead and you add a calculator, what you can do is you can hit variable, which on your calculator is going to be above the key button. I'm sorry, above all the numbers. And what I can do is, let's say I want to find the variance, right? Well, that's just the square of the standard deviation. So what I can do is I can find right there the standard deviation, and I can go ahead and square it, which is how we calculate the variance, and hit enter. And I'll find that my answer is 950.982. And if I want to do that to 3 significant figures, I would write down 951 as my variance. So let me actually go back to my document, and I'll write that for this one, that my variance is 951. Now, finding the range might actually be a lot easy, considering that we have a pretty short data set, but let's imagine that's really long or complicated, or there's frequencies involved. It might not be so obvious or easy, but luckily in our calculator, there's a quick way to do this using those variables. So if I go back to my list and spreadsheet here, and I want to find the range, remember that the range is just the maximum minus the minimum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit variable, and I'm going to take my max. That is my maximum value. I know it looks kind of weird with stat.maxx, but it's just the max value. And I'm going to subtract, so I hit the subtract button. I'll go back to variable, and I'm going to hit min. So now I have max minus min, which is going to give me my range of 92. So my range, which is part 2, is going to be 92. Now what about my interquartile range? Well, again, my interquartile range is my third quartile minus my first quartile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit variable, and I am going to scroll down to stat.q3x. Okay, again, I know the stat dot and some of the formatting here is a little bit weird, but just keep in mind Q3, third quartile. Okay, and we'll subtract from that variable, and I'm sure you've already kind of figured this out, stat.q1x. Okay, so I'm taking my third quartile, Q3, minus my first quartile, Q1, hit enter. My interquartile range is 38.5. 38.5. Excellent. So what happens if we are actually given a little bit more of a complicated data set that includes a frequency table, or a frequency column in the table, I should say? Well, we've already gone through this, score and frequency. So what we want to do is go ahead and add a list and spreadsheet and have one title as score and one title as frequency, just as we did before. Okay. Now, once you have these in your table, go ahead and go back up to the C1, make sure the cursor is not blinking, make sure your titles are appropriate. Menu, statistics, stat calculations, one variable, and I'm going to go to X1 list, and that is going to be my score. My frequency list is my frequency. I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm given my average, I'm given all of this good stuff. And so I am now going to add a calculator, And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the same exact thing as I did in the last one. I want the variance, which is the square of the standard deviation. So I'm going to hit variable, go to my standard deviation, and square it. Hit enter. I'm going to have 7.8476. 0.85 as my as my variance. Now I want to find the range, which is the maximum value minus the minimum value. So I'm going to go ahead to my max, subtract it from my minimum, hit enter, and I will have it the answer of 10. Now I want to find my interquartile range, which is just going to be Q3 minus Q1, enter 5. So now I have my answers for all three of those problems. 7.85 is my variance, 10 is my range, and 5 is my interquartile range. So I hope that shed a little bit of light into how we can use our calculators effectively to solve for the statistical measurements that we're after. So in this case, we used the variance by squaring the standard deviation. We found the range by taking our maximum minus our minimum, and then we found the interquartile range by taking the third quartile and subtracting it from the first quartile. In our next video, we're going to take a look at how transformations to the data set affect certain statistical measurements or how they don't, lack thereof. So I'll see you on the next video. Take care.